So Binna, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the book, what prompted you, I suppose, to write it?
I think the impetus for this book really was the type of discussions that are going on in organisations about gender equality and how we perceive men and women in organisations. And we thought so much of what people are saying seems to be based on conjecture and opinion, that we as psychologists kind of almost had a responsibility to kind of put a different perspective on things.
Right throughout the book, there is a theme that there is no difference, objectively, no difference between the way women's minds work, if you like, and the way men's minds work. How can you be sure of that? Because that actually goes against the grain of so much of what is said about men and women.
That's the key, actually. There's so much that's said about the way men and women are, but actually when you look at the data, and particularly how it applies to work, because we're not looking at sexual attraction or anything like this, we're actually looking at people at work and their capabilities. And when you look at it from that perspective, you actually find that there are no differences.
But there must be, because women's hormones are objectively different. Hormones affect mood, affect behaviour. It is said that as men get older, their testosterone levels drop, they become kinder.
Even something like a hormone isn't a fixed amount in any individual, and it does vary between individuals at all ages as well. So you can't say categorically that all men are like this and all women are like that. There's a lot of debate actually about hormones in men and women and how that impacts on work. Remember, that's what our book is about how it impacts at work. Let me illustrate it this way. Essentially, the view is that in hunter-gatherer societies, men hunted and they went out. For days on end, they clubbed a dinosaur. They dragged it back to the cave where the women are waiting with their herbs and children to cook this dinosaur up. We call this theory YDD, yabba dabba doo. Essentially, it's taking the Flintstones as a reality documentary that Fred and Wilma are us and we are Fred and Wilma, completely interchangeable.
And you disagree with that?
Well, actually, it's not just me. It's actually the people who've studied this sort of thing. The hunter-gatherer societies were in fact nomadic, so they're on the move. And the roles were far more interchangeable. So women hunted, men gathered. In fact, it seems to be more accurate to describe them as gatherer-hunters as opposed to hunter-gatherers. But we create these kind of just so stories to justify the way we are now, and they are not correct.
Why, then, have we this construct now that says, in the main, women should be at home bringing up the children, men should go out and work?
Yeah, this really occurred during the Industrial Revolution. That's when jobs were created. So when you look at the history of men and women at work, you also have to look at the history of work. And the notion of a job where you go to work, you work for several hours and you go home, was something that was created in the 18th, 19th century. Before that, people worked collaboratively and in family units. The Victorians kind of had this idealised view of a woman, and that the best role for a woman was actually to be at home. So middle-class women the aspiration was they would be at home. The late 18th, early 19th century, the biggest occupation for middle-class women was actually commerce. They were actually involved in business. By the middle of the 19th century, very few women were involved in business. So this view about what women's role was changed actually quite quickly during the course of that century.
Binna, a lot of people watching this will be very uncomfortable with what you've just said about being the same, because that runs counter to deep-seated beliefs we have about women being more caring, men being stronger, more authoritative. The way we bring our children up is very different. It'll be mum who tends to care more than dad. It'll be sort of the fun, feisty one, if you like. You're questioning very deep-held beliefs here.
And the roles that we expect people to play is actually what we're questioning as well as people's beliefs. But the fact of the matter is that one of the things that distinguishes human beings from other species, for example, take childcare, is that both parents are involved in the rearing of their children, of their offspring. And that actually distinguishes us. Now, we've actually reached a stage now, you could argue, that it's actually quite unnatural where we're expecting one of the parents to take the predominant role in terms of caring for the child, and the other one to take a very different role. Now that, you could argue, is actually very unnatural. Now there are many men who want to spend more time with their children, but because of the roles that men are expected to play, they kind of feel inhibited from saying they want to do that.
And women, even today in the 21st century, you would say, are still expected in the main to be the ones that stay home.
Without a doubt, yeah. All stereotypes boil down to an evaluation of warmth and competence. How warm do we feel towards another person? How competent do we think they are? And women behaving in a counter-stereotypical way and performing roles which are counter-stereotypical will be viewed as colder. I met somebody who's an engineer. She's now got her own engineering business. And when she was at school, when she was younger and she was at school, because she liked maths and science, she was being told girls don't do maths and science, and she thought she was a freak. I met somebody several weeks ago, recently, who was told by her boss, "You have to be more caring." Well, she doesn't want to be more caring. She's a good manager. Why does she have to be more caring? And she's actually her interpretation. None of her male colleagues are told they have to be more caring. She's not behaving in a stereotypically female way.
You might think this is a strange way of putting it, but when I was reading about this, when I was reading your book, I actually got quite cross with you. I did, and I said to myself, "Oh, Binna, come on, you're just..." I didn't think you were the sort of chap who had a chip on your shoulder. And it's only when you start to delve a bit deeper that you think, actually, you're not saying we should all be homogenous like some North Korean soldiers or anything. Yeah. You're just saying we should celebrate who we are as individuals, rather than you're a man, you're a woman.
Yeah, and some of this is, clearly that when you look at discrimination in the workplace, particularly when you look at leadership positions, and also the jobs which are better paid, you actually find that they are typically held by men. So there is an issue there. But also, whilst women are being constrained in terms of the roles that they're expected to play, men are being constrained too. And they get penalised for that. I mean, the World Economic Forum did a piece of work. So where a woman takes extended maternity leave, there's about a 50% chance she will return to the same job or a job at the same level. So half of the women will return to a job at a lower level. Where a man takes extended paternity leave, so it takes extended time to look after his children, there's a 40% chance that he'll return to the same job or a job at the same level. So actually men get penalised more for those caring activities. So there's no wonder that some men kind of think, well, actually, it's not going to work out for me if I take this time off.
What solutions does the book offer?
Yeah, it's not just about policies. This book is about our own attitudes, about my attitudes, about your attitudes, about the other people around us. And it's about us kind of being more sensitive to the kind of biases that we see and being prepared to tackle those. And the book does go into a lot of detail, actually, about the type of biases that exist and the sorts of things that we can do to counteract them. Yes.
People are different.
Not
men are different to women.
Exactly. That's exactly the message. Yeah, people are different. Individuals are different. People are different, not men and women.
Binna, being devil's advocate, couldn't it be the case that you almost want sexism to be apparent to justify the fact that you've wanted to write this book? You're finding things that probably aren't there in most people's minds to justify the whole thrust of your argument.
Oh, well, no, they didn't. That's an interesting question. But no, we're not talking about this stuff, actually. And every piece of research you look at kind of shows that sexism in the workplace, or patriarchy, sometimes it's referred to, is actually something that is prevalent and people are aware of. But when it comes to policy making and particularly at government kind of level, this is something that's just kind of blanked out altogether. It's airbrushed out. One of the things new in the book is actually to say that an attitude towards flexible working, for example, the negative kind of, generally speaking, if you're working flexibly, you can't be committed to the job. And this is essentially the association that people make. This is an attitude that goes back to the formation of the guilds. So this is something like it's hundreds of years old. And so it's not necessarily an individual. It's not just about me and you as individuals. It's about the culture in which we're working, which transmits these ideas to us without us even realising it. Essentially, we're saying, look, these are the sources of bias. These are their manifestations in the workplace. Here are some things you can do about them on each of them. You take this material and you apply this creatively for yourself. You're now going to be armed with the knowledge and the information that you need to be able to solve your own problems. So it's a different approach, Adam, this time than from what we've done before. We're giving people the knowledge and the information and then saying, okay, you've done it with every other book I've ever written. Do it this time. Just apply this in the way that you think is most appropriate.